Well, thank you everybody for joining. I know we're all probably Zoom fatigued, but this is one that we were excited. Jim and I have been talking about doing this for a while, and I can think of nobody better to really facilitate this conversation, and we're excited to record it and have it available to our community and network. And so, topic today is business relationship building, and I think even the fact that we're in Zoom and we have all sort of had to learn how to be productive in doing things this way. There's some things that are slightly nuanced about an environment that's very virtual and distributed like this, but there are also some relationship building things that I think stand the test of time. And I could think of nobody better than Jim Luce to really guide us through that. And so just give you a quick background, and
I'll
Jim,
cover.
You want to cover that?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want, before I hand it over to you, I've had the great benefit and really pleasure of getting to know Jim over the last, really since the beginning of the year. And we've had several amazing conversations. I could tell from the moment we got introduced and met that we were going to be fast friends. And it's been a real pleasure. And so first of all, thank you for joining us. I think, it's evidenced in the kind of career that you've had, how good you are at building relationships and how you've been able to use this to build productive relationships. And I would say output in a variety of different industries that many people don't necessarily believe they can take from industry to industry. So I think that'll be important to share as well, because I think part of being an entrepreneur is being able to go into something that's brave new world, like going into a new industry. And so thank you, Jim, for being here and for everybody for joining. And I think it'll be a really fun conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you both, Carrie and Michelle. This is, you'll find as we go through this, it's kind of a bit of a passion of mine, my whole career as far as relationships and building. And my wife, every time I come home, I got another guy, the same person that introduced you and I, Carrie, introduced me to a guy that we ended up, he came over for a bottle of wine, and we've now had dinner 3 times and going to Napa and trying to maybe do some business together. So just clicked again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the thing about relationships, and I'll get to my background in just a second, but relationships are not industry specific. They're not company specific. They're not region specific. Relationships are everywhere, right? Whether they're personal and they're business or whatever. And too many people just let them happen or not. They don't cause them. And you can cause them, and you don't have to be born with it. A lot of people say, hey, you're a born networker. Well, yeah, some people might be a little more comfortable in the communication piece, but you're not born with the skill. You learn the skill, and you can learn it even if you're hyper introverted. You can still learn it. It's not something that you either that you're born or not. And the key is to practice it. And you're not going to be perfect at it every time. There are times even after my almost 40 years of practicing it, sometimes I go, man, why did I just say that? That didn't make sense or whatever. You do that, right? So there are numerous touch points. Relationships come from, just think about any interaction you have with your customer, whether that's on the phone. Remember the phones, the things you picked up and you talked in your phone, email, a meeting, a Zoom call, trade show, a letter, conferences, etc., dinners, entertainment, golf, right? The good thing about golf is you can't talk all business for 5 hours. One thing, before I jump into the slides, one thing on Zoom calls and going to your offices and building relationships is you better look around everything you see in the background, everything that happens, what you see, pictures they have in their office, trophies they have, things they don't have, how messy are they, how organized. There's so much you can learn to help build a relationship if you're observant in that, and then quickly take notes later. The relationship, the value of a relationship is, what does it mean to you? If I really know this person, how can we help each other? I have a degree in hotel management, and I put some extra things on there that don't have anything really to do with us, but that's the kind of things relationship building go on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm in the Sigma Chi fraternity, I have a hotel management degree. I was always on a skateboard in college, and I had somebody 2 weeks ago, I haven't talked to since college, said, do you still skateboard? That's how much of an impression it was, right? always had a Frisbee in my hand. I was always going to Utah to ski, and I was coming to California a lot. Went with Marriott Hotels, 21 years there, progressed all the way through. I was the youngest director of sales of a major hotel, youngest director of marketing, youngest RVP ever, 21 years. And you can see the performance there. And it's really to set the stage for you, because you'll see I had that level of performance in 3 different industries, as Carrie mentioned. And people go, how could you possibly leave an industry and go start a new one? You have all your relationships you've left. Well, I have left those relationships. I don't talk to them as much. I still have them. And ironically, they've come to benefit all the way along in all 3 of my industries. But the relationships is really what caused a huge amount of my success through there, and its ability to go and make it a concerted effort. So probably the biggest win was Amneal Pharmaceuticals. We launched in the commodity market, generic pharmaceuticals. We launched in June of 2007. We did 18 million that year. We did $1.1 billion in 2017. We went public May 10th of 18, and I retired May 11th, which was a good thing. And so the last 2 years, you can see what I've been doing, which is, it's really a lot of just sharing 40 years of experience. The key is, especially as an entrepreneur, is you need to know your value, yours personally and your business and your product or service. They're all different values. They're not all the same thing. And in a relationship, your value might mean more than your business's value, especially when you're talking to private equity, you're looking for investors. You may not get them in this deal, but 3 deals down the road, because you have a great relationship. Hey, this fits you, Joe, really well. I want to come back. Well, if you have that relationship, they're going to be open to that for you. So the key is to know your value, connect with the right person at the right time with the right message, and then connect emotionally. So if you go on to kind of some building blocks, Carrie, you want to hit the next slide would be great. So one business constant, no matter what industry, what age you are, relationships matter, right? But you have to be earned. It has to be real. It can't be this facade of a relationship. It needs to generate mutual value. What do you bring to them and what do they bring to you, right? If they're a potential investor or customer, it's pretty obvious what they bring to you from a pure raw business standpoint, but what do they bring to you to help you be smarter at your business, help you learn your pitfalls, help them to be honest with you about what doesn't work as much as what does work, right? It has to be more than just business. You can't always talk business and build a relationship. It's not going to be a highly effective relationship. And one thing to keep in mind, I've had to train people over a lot of years. It doesn't cause a customer or investor or potential partner to make a bad business decision if you have a great relationship. It earns the honesty. That's really what you get out of a great business relationship. Candor and honest and open, and ongoing feedback and suggestions. I've got customers that I still talk to 25 years later. Hey, I'm thinking of doing this. Here's where I am. What are your thoughts? What am I missing? And because of that relationship, and the things I'm going to cover will help validate that, those people still talk to me as if we were doing business every day together. And I think that's really critically important, those things. You have to go in with sincerity and be real about it. So then there are some building blocks that I kind of put all my thoughts together in a group. You can go to the next slide, Carrie. And I'm going to cover these in detail. And by the way, you're all going to, I have a 3-pager consolidation of all this that Michelle can send out to you if you want it afterwards, after the call, so you don't have to copiously write all these down. Of course, that's a big assumption that you're all going to write all that stuff down. But anyway, that's a whole different story. So overall attitude, approach, and application. It's what are you going to make of it? How do you get that phone call, that personal meeting, a Zoom appointment? How do you get that? Earn that. Discovering and creating connection points. You'll find how valuable that is, incredibly. Learning about them, engaging about their business, developing the relationship, building credibility and trust, assuring reliability through follow-up and follow-through, and you'll be surprised how much of a differentiator that line is. So there's so many people that don't do it well. And then re-engaging over time and continuing to build the relationship. So I'm going to break each of those down. So let's go to the first one, Carrie. So overall attitude, approach, and application. You need to be intentional. You know, they say if you don't know where you're going, every road takes you there, right? So you can do a lot of stuff that's It's stuff, but does it get you moving forward where you want? You have to say, I need to get to know these people, this person, these different people, these groups, whatever. Be very intentional about that, because you don't have time as an entrepreneur to talk to everybody, although you feel like you need to, but you have to be intentional. And your intentionality may be get to know the relationship enough to get a candid feedback whether there's interest or not, and then politely move on. That could be a plan. But if you find some core people you really need to get to know, be intentional, be sincere, truly sincere. If it's, I can't tell you how many people I've met with over the years, either interviewing or trying to build a relationship, whatever, and you can just tell it's like they took some class, wrote down the notes, and I'm supposed to tell you and ask you this, what do you think about this, right? And they sound like mechanical. You got to be sincere about it. You got to be real and transparent. You'll find that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Absolute integrity. You don't know something, admit you don't know it. Don't say, oh, I called and left you 3 messages when you know darn well you didn't, right? That will get found out. It can so quickly destroy any potential relationship by lack of integrity. And the people that are okay with the lack of integrity, you don't want to do business with anyway, because you're probably not going to trust what they do. Listen much more than you talk. You learn a lot more. Everybody's heard the old adage, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Well, you do need to listen, but not hear, but listen. And we'll talk about how that applies in a lot of other spots through this. Ask questions and then listen. Too many people quickly ask a question, and then if you ask the person, what's your greatest business success? And they pause for a minute to think, because you've kind of surprised them with a question. That awkward silence you have to be comfortable with. Don't try to jump in and, was it when you started this business? Was it that? Don't give them those answers. Listen to them. Give them a chance to process, because some of you process very quickly and can answer very quickly and be right on, have a great nonlinear thought process. Some people need to kind of contemplate it for 10 or 20 seconds and then give you a good answer. You want the good answer more than you want to rush. Learn with each response and then continue to build. As you learn something from their answer, don't just go, okay, yeah, okay, great, he said that. Because if you're spending too much time thinking about the next question, you're not really listening to that answer. And that's why so much time gets wasted in relationship building that could be 10 times more effective, but you're so worried about the next question that you don't hear what they said or ask the second question, right? Oh, I had a really good experience when we did our national sales meeting in Chicago. Well, most people, national sales meeting in Chicago, good experience. And move on. Really, what made it such a good experience? Right? You get them to talk more about it, because obviously it's something that whatever you said triggered them to think about. Be patient. You're not going to build a relationship in 1 phone call or 1 meeting or 1 Zoom. It took Carrie, we took him half a call. No, just kidding. But it's going to take time. You're going to have a whole bunch of things you want to learn. You're not going to necessarily get those all in the first call. Be patient. Be prepared. Not scripted, but be prepared. Put down bullet points of things you want to ask them, personal and professional. What do you want to learn? So as you're talking to them, you're listening, but you also have some easy to read bullet points, so you don't have to lose concentration on them, but still remind yourself to bring some things up, because that's important. You're going to know, hey, I remember he mentioned that he went to, Brazil on his spring break in his junior year, and I was just there a year ago. I'd love to compare notes or whatever. So put Brazil, compare, or something to that effect. And then the biggest thing is all these points apply at every step of this process. You always need to be intentional and sincere, et cetera, all the way down through there. So then the next one is, how do you get the phone call, the personal meeting, or the Zoom appointment? I'll give you an example. You explain your desire to talk, to learn from them, and why. So when I left the hotel business, I was 21 years with Marriott. I'm still to this day very good friends with Bill Marriott, his kids, his grandkids, his son-in-law, his daughter-in-law. I'm very, very close to the family. I used to horseback ride with his dad, the founder of Marriott Hotels. So very close. People thought, you cut me open, little red M's would fall out of my blood. That's how close I was and thought. So I left the industry because I wouldn't move to Washington. And, Bill Marriott, I got a nice note on the wall here from him. He was sorry to see me go. But as I left Marriott, I went into the pharmaceutical wholesale business. Knew nothing about pharmaceutical wholesale. So I called the CEO of Walgreens and I called the CEO of CVS, said, I'd like to meet with you. And why would some guy from a distributor call the CEO of Walgreens at the time was, I don't know, $70 billion company or whatever. We were only 18 billion, so we were small and only a supplier. So I said, listen, I said, here's the deal. I understand business. I had a great career with Marriott. I understand business, but I don't understand this business. And before I learn our business in our company, I'd really like to understand the business from your view. Do you mind? Could you teach me the pharmacy business, retail pharmacy business, and let me learn from you? Didn't want to sell him anything. I literally told him exactly why I wanted to meet. So our first one came up was the CEO of CVS. I flew back to Rhode Island, and literally that morning, he had some family emergency and had bailed on me. He allocated from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So he had his COO cover for me because he didn't want to breach his commitment. So his COO and I sat down, and he said, Jim, he goes, I'm sorry, I got a hard stop at 2 o'clock. This kind of sprung on me, blah, blah, blah. We met from 1 through dinner. He blew off all of his meetings the rest of the day. And he told me then, but many times afterwards, he said, Jim, you know what was great about why? I said, why did you meet with me so long? He said, because you truly were learning. You really cared to understand. You asked great questions. He goes, I could tell in the time we spent together, you would be a great supplier to work with because you would take the time to understand who we are, how what you have impacts us, et cetera. And I told a little bit longer on that story because everybody told me, the CEO of our company said, Jim, you'll never get into the CEO of Walgreens or CVS. You're a head of sales for a distributor, a supplier. You don't mean anything strategically to them. Same thing happened with CVS, with Walgreens, but I got to the CEO. And he and I are still friends now, even after we're both retired. But that's just an example of tell them why. Be honest about it. I want to learn. I want to learn. How do I do? If you're an entrepreneur, I told this, matter of fact, there's a outside opportunity I'm working on right now. I said, listen, guys, I don't understand corporate structure redo because we're trying to broker a deal. I said, that's not my forte. I don't know that, but I can see the value prop. I can see what the customer value increase is going to be by the two of us working together. You need somebody smarter than me or different expertise than me about the corporate structure and stock versus cash versus, just be straight up about what you know and don't know. And it's amazing. In my experience, 99% of the people want to help you get better at what you do. If you really listen, you take notes, you really show in your questions that you're learning as you go. So that's important part. Sorry, I did a long time on that, but that's so important because you're trying to get into that. You can't go in and just sell. You need to understand what value do you bring them and what do they bring you and why do you want to meet? So they understand, oh, okay, I can allocate an hour. That'll be a good use of my time. When you present meaningful value again, and why. You have to always think, what value can I bring this person in every interaction I have, right? Whether it's a phone call or an email. We had a president of Marriott when I started there, and he told me this like 3 weeks after I started with Marriott. He said, every single customer or employee meeting I have, I try to leave them with some piece of that they are smarter after I left than before I got there. Whether it's an article I read about their industry, it's something I read about their hobby, it's some about their hometown or whatever. He goes, I always tried to provide. He goes, did I bat 100%? Probably not, but I probably batted in the 90s, right? And that's, if people really know you care about them and you stay up nights thinking about that relationship, that's a good thing. Validate why they are someone you want to talk to and get to know, right? Well, hey, you know what, here's why I'm talking to you. I understand you have done these kind of deals in my space, or you understand technology, you understand this, and everything I've researched, you would bring great value. I'd love to learn from you. Even if we don't do a deal together, I think I can learn a lot from you, and I would love your advice. Who doesn't love people saying, geez, I'd love to get your advice? Most people are going to help you. So discovering or creating connection points. This is probably one of the biggest ones in my mind, is to build a personal relationship to gain trust, right? Beyond the business. Yeah, you got to ask them a ton of questions. Some are open-ended, some are closed-ended. But find about their life, their hometown, their background, their career. I mean, career, don't just say, oh, I worked at IBM and I worked here and I worked here. What jobs did you have? When did you move? Why did you move? How many cities did you live in? Really? You lived in Greenville? Why Greenville and then over to San Francisco or whatever? The more you get to know somebody, their sports and their hobbies, what schools did they go to? How about, were they in a fraternity or sorority? What degree or degrees do they have? Birthdays, anniversaries, etc. I got to tell you, I kept, for the first 20 years of my career, those of you that don't remember, I started with, there were no computers. There was a fax machine. I had the first Marriott fax machine ever in 1981 at Camelback Inn. So we wrote files, and I had a whole separate thing about customer information. And on the left-hand side of the file, so I kept running tally. Every time I talked to them, I added to it. So every next conversation, hey, by the way, you told me that your 12-year-old son was going to Little League playoffs last time we talked. How did he do? It's amazing how many people think you remembered that. It is just shocking. I took copious notes, and I always have something about everybody that I've built relationships with, right? And it can be all those things, because then you find, and you take detailed notes, but then as you hear those answers, and you don't rush through them, you don't have to ask all these in one call, then you respond with answers that connect you to them, or even if it's something you did similar, or it's a couple degrees of separation. I'll give you an example. Say, they went to University of Niagara. Well, that's upstate New York. So what do you know about upstate New York? What could you connect to? Oh, I've been to the Niagara Falls. Or do you live kind of near there? Do you go to school near there? My dad's parents are from upstate New York. They're from Elmira. Oh, yeah, I've been to Elmira. Have you been to these places? And you start to find connection points about all those topics. They love football. They love basketball. They're in the same fraternity or whatever. You can talk about that. It gives you something to talk about each next time and to build on. And you suddenly have a relationship beyond just business. Next slide, Carrie. So learning about them. Do good research on who you want to really, and again, we're being intentional. So who do you really want to get to know? I didn't just ask them questions that you can find out nowadays easily on the internet. You know where he went to college, you know what his fraternity, you know his hometown, how many kids he has, or whatever you can find. There's so much information out there now, but find at least some core things. And what was his major? And he's been in, his entire career with Walgreens. Wow, how many stores did they have when, I noticed, I was reading, and you can tell people, they know you research. I was reading, you started with Walgreens in 1968. How many stores did they have then? I said, I couldn't find that number or whatever. You want to get research from different people and different sources so you have something to talk about. Again, connection points, whatever they're talking about business, so you can connect it all together and realize you want a total relationship with this person, not just, can you buy what I'm selling you? Ask open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions don't get the customer, the investor, potential partner to talk. You want to get people to talk, because when they talk, they will lead you exactly down the path of how to build a relationship, right? So if you say, tell me about X, tell me about that last big launch, that last big acquisition you made, and just stop there. Don't, because a lot of people will go, were you happy with it? Was it good? Was it a great deal? Just say, tell me about it. Because if they go to negative to start, it wasn't a good experience. You probably don't want to belabor it, but you can learn something from it. Or if they go very positive and feeling, it was immediately accretive to earnings. Candidly, it was probably one of the best acquisitions we made. Well, and most people would, make a note of that. The best people building relationships. So why do you say that? Help me explain why it was the best acquisition you've ever made. He may have said, because my current shareholders got the best, or we got an equal 50-50 value and we both got synergy, or whatever. You're going to learn a lot about a relationship with people. Do you want to work with them? Are they going to be the kind you want as an investor or a partner? But you're going to understand where their head is in each of those things. So you ask open-ended about anything, then you're going to learn more that way. And then you build with further questions, right? To clarify or understand or extend, like I just did. So why did you think that was your best acquisition ever? And so it's really the talking, getting them to talk is really critical. So then you can gauge about their business. You do need to gauge about their business. It's not all personal relationship, but you work these in, not all in one call. But I've had some of the best conversations asking this first one. What's your biggest business? And I didn't write them all out separately. What was your biggest business success? Your biggest surprise, your biggest joy, your biggest mistake, your biggest error, your biggest embarrassment. It's amazing how candid people will be when you get into discussion about these things, especially if you go to dinner or you play golf, more dinner because you have a glass of wine, a cocktail, whatever, you're relaxed. You can't talk 3 hours of business. If you talk a full 3 hours of business, you need to work on your relationship skills when you're at dinner. Jerry Heller, he was the CEO of Maze Drugs in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They had about 70, 80 stores. He was one of our customers at AmerisourceBergen. And I asked him, I said, what was your biggest mistake in your career? Oh, he goes, 1967, I think it was. I'm blanking out on the year. 1967, my dad and I drove over to Bentonville, Arkansas, saw this nutcase, Sam Walton. And Sam wanted to put pharmacies in all of his stores, but didn't know anything about pharmacy. So he was going to give us the space in every one of his stores to put a pharmacy in, and just wanted a little bit of nominal rent. He just wanted to provide value to his customers. And he goes, we had a 2-hour meeting with him. We went out in the car. My dad asked me, what'd you think of Sam? He goes, and he said, Jerry goes, I thought he was a total nutcase. He's delusional. He's got dreams way beyond he could ever execute. And hindsight, they have, 2,700 pharmacies all over the country, all over the world, et cetera, et cetera. But you find some of the most interesting, we've talked about that story, he and I've talked about that story and additional nuances of it so many times. And, everybody that's been a successful business person has had some failures. You can even use the word failure, but I give you some nicer words there. Mistake, error, embarrassment. The embarrassing ones are even more fun, a lot of them. Learn more about each of those. So if they say, what was your biggest mistake, then wow. So how did that happen? How did that come together with the Sam Walton meeting? And what did you learn? What, in hindsight, how did you miss that? And whatever, you ask more questions. And how did you learn or adjust how you operated once you had that mistake or that win or that joy, et cetera? Ask questions to help you learn their business and their industry. Remember, it's about them when you're building the relationship. If you always focus on them, they're going to ask you plenty to get to know you, but you're going to break down the wall. And if you're always learning about them and showing you're not selfish of just buy my product, just invest in my company, just partner with me, whatever, that's a really important thing. Here's this fourth bullet. I got to tell you, this is one I drill down in every sales school I've taught, with my son, my kids. The okay people in relationship building ask the first question, maybe the second question, and the ones that think they're phenomenal, the third question. The real phenomenal ones ask questions number 6, 7, and 8 on a given topic, right? You get down because nobody tells you the whole story in the first answer. Like the Sam Walton one, we probably talked an hour and a half the first time he told me that Sam Walton story, and drilled way down into it and learned so much about how Walmart operated then and what their thoughts were and what their objectives were and how they carried that out. In hindsight, he went back and applied a lot of the stuff he learned from them into his stores. And he put up superstores, and he had a lot. He goes, Jim, I plagiarized a lot of what we learned from Sam Walton that day that we thought he was a nutcase, because he proved he was well beyond a nutcase, right? This one's kind of a change of direction because you're entrepreneurs and in smaller businesses, but ensure as you grow, even if it's 2 or 3 of you, that you have an enterprise-wide matrix of relationships. This is one thing I started with Marriott. I actually created it for Marriott National Accounts and took it everywhere I went, is connecting CEO to CEO, operations to operations, finance to finance, HR to HR. And all of a sudden you have this matrix relationship. And if any one of those falls apart, the rest will hold it together. But you learn so much, because if I got my CFO talking to their CFO, they're going to talk CFO language, which I'm not sure I fully understand or even care to understand. No, just kidding. But then you get operations guys talk about, like I had my VP of distribution. He went to every one of our customers to watch one of our orders get delivered when I was at the pharmaceutical manufacturer with Amneal Pharmaceuticals. He wanted to see how it would arrive, so what the customer's impression was of our orders. Because that had to do with how we packed the pallet, but it also had to do which suppliers, which freight companies we were using, and how did they treat our pallets, and when they received it. So one of the customers, Cardinal Health, which is one of the top 3 wholesalers, about an $85 billion a year company, when the pallet arrived, Tony, our VP, we had like 6 pallets arrive. He watched them process it, and he said to the guy that runs their central distribution, he said, "Why do you do that? Why do you put those over there and this there?" I said, because Tony says, we pack them exactly on our pallets as you want to store them on your racks. Why don't you take it from here to here and go right to the rack and put it in the opposite direction, turn it around here and take it right to the rack? He provided so much value, that head of that distribution center changed all vendors to have to palletize the way we did. And it saved him like 14% labor cost on the offloading portion of it. So that's value you bring, right? When you bring that value to a relationship, it didn't cost us anything. Yeah, Tony's expense to go up to their warehouse, but if you're always looking to improve the value for both of you, you're going to have phenomenal relationships. It's not, you can't be all me, me, me. A 90-10 will never last the long run, right? It's not always going to be exactly 50-50, but you have to always strive. If you both strive to give the other guy more value, you're going to have build great relationships. And then this last one, acknowledge competition. Don't pretend it doesn't exist. Don't pretend they all suck. Acknowledge competition, both yours and theirs, in a balanced and real way. Again, go back to slide 1 with the first things about be sincere, be real, etc. Be objective about it. When we launched Amneal Pharmaceuticals, we came in and said, listen, here's what I think about the industry. Here's how we're going to operate. There's some good ones out there. I think we have a different way to approach it. The product is the product. It's commodity. It's a generic pharmaceutical. But the relationship is really what matters. We build Amneal on high integrity, high transparency, and proactive communications. We didn't build Amneal on our products. Our products were phenomenal. We have hyper compliant with FDA. They met all the rules, but our product was no better than the next guy's because they're required by the FDA to be the same, right? So as long as I'm meeting all the FDA requirements, I have no differentiation in the product. But what you'll learn, go to the next slide. I think that what I'm about to go into is the next slide. I'll come back to that point. But we build Amneal on the relationships, and we were the fastest growing pharmaceutical company in the world on a 5, 7, and 10-year compound annual growth rate in the world, brand or generic, for 6 straight years, right? So we blew away the numbers. Our margin went up every year of our first 10 years, while our revenue grew at 35.8% average growth. So it's in a commodity industry, right? So commodity industry, usually your margin goes down as you grow your business. So developing the relationship, pick up where you left off. Remember we talked about those notes you have about their business things they've done, their personal things they've done, what happened in the last conversation. Use those reference points. Hey, like I said earlier, about the Suns Little League playoffs. How did that go? Or your daughter was going to get married, or you were going to take a trip to Italy, or whatever it is. Reconnect, remind them. They talk to hundreds of people all the time, probably thousands since the last time they talked to you. So don't assume they remember everything. You need to connect those dots for them. And they'll go, oh, yeah, that's right. We talked about that, right? Get to emotions. You want to work your way that you're finding information early on, but then you get to emotions, opinions, and feelings. Hey, I read that article about, that one of our, peers that just got picked up, the FDA just gave him a warning letter. What do you think about that? What do you hear? Right? Those are the kind of things where you really get people to open up and the relationship builds stronger. And you have to protect that, again, total integrity. You have to protect their confidentiality. Don't be whispered down the lane to the industry. Hey, Joe over at Walgreens told me X, Y, and Z. You'll blow a relationship there pretty quickly too. And you do that through structured questions, but not presented as structured questions, right? You write the question for yourself, but work it into the conversation. Don't make it sound too calculated. Even if you know you want to talk about it, don't make it sound calculated, because they want to feel they have a relationship and a friend earlier on that they're comfortable with. More is going to come out the more comfortable people are with each other. Be vulnerable with your stories, your flaws, your errors. Remember all those questions about their business and their personal greatest success, greatest errors. every time they tell me a greatest error, I tell them one of my greatest errors, whether they asked or not. So that's funny because I had something happen, blah, 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 whatever it was. And holy smokes, was I embarrassed. I thought I had this guy and I sent this to the wrong company or whatever. You don't want to make yourself look like a bonehead. That's not my goal. But the goal is you are human. You've probably made some mistakes. And you need to be straightforward about that, especially if you're getting them to open up about it. So the more you can kind of mirror, if you share one of your flaws, I'll share one of my flaws. That's going to help, again, with the openness of the relationship. Be honest about what you don't know, right? I don't even pretend. When I went into Walgreens and CVS, I don't know your business. I've literally been in the industry 30 days. So I didn't know anything about their business. I'd only talked to our people. So they had no problem with that. They said the fact that you want to ask first instead of coming in and tell me how to do my business or tell me how you can bring me value instead of asking, that was a big differentiator. That's a big, and I did that with when we went into Walmart early on with the VP of pharmacy. We talked about, I said, what are your biggest challenges you can't get addressed? How do we create more value? What are the nits in your job that we could maybe work on? Well, we found a way to change their packaging. We invested the money to do a whole different kind of packaging for the products we sent to them that would save them 3 steps in their pharmacy. It wasn't required by the FDA. It was just a nice to have, but it saved them about $400,000 or $500,000 a year in labor just by us changing a packaging that didn't cost us any more to do for them than it did with our normal packaging, right? And you think we had a fan for life, not me, but our company. Sandy, man, I got to tell you, I could use her as a reference for every customer we have anywhere, probably still today. Ask the biggest personal, this is where you go and you talk about personal. Remember the success, surprise, joy, mistake, error, and embarrassment? Same thing here, but personal. These are even better stories than business stories. They're a little harder to get to. People talk more about their business successes and failures before they talk about personal failures, at least. The successes they'll talk about personal. And yeah, I'm married, I have 3 great kids and they all went to college or whatever, but getting some of the embarrassments or errors or mistakes when you get there, you really got a good relationship going. The people have that they're willing to be vulnerable like that, and they know you're not going to trash them. Although with my sense of humor, I tend to tease people quite a bit once I know them, and so that's kind of a known thing. But anyway, so building credibility and trust. Obviously, this is a critical part of building a relationship, right? You have to have credibility and trust if you're going to really grow. Relationships take time, focus, and commitment. We said you're not going to get in the first call. You have to be intentional, commitment. You have to be focused. When you're going to get on a call, have a meeting, do a Zoom, have dinner, go play golf, don't treat golf as just a game. If you're taking somebody you're trying to build a relationship with, golf, you better have gone over your notes with them. And, even if you put it in your phone, 4 or 5 things you want to make sure you ask them during the golf game. Could be about his college, could be about his family, could be about his business, whatever. Could be about suppliers in the industry. It could be like right now, the national stockpile is a big discussion point for the pharmaceutical industry. Been on way too many calls about that here in the last several weeks. It's a real issue. I think there are a lot of people that don't understand the business and they think it's much easier to solve than it is, but it needs to be solved. So make sure you have some notes of what you want to cover, what you want to do. And I put old school versus millennial because I think, well, I know my approach is old school, but I got to tell you, the millennials need to learn a little bit about that from a relationship building. Everything is so fast and so efficient. And I got to tell you, if I'm working on building a relationship with somebody, I'm not doing it on a text because you can't keep texts and memorialize them like you can an email, right? Yeah, text is great. Hey, I'm 5 minutes away from your office, that kind of stuff. But anything about business, can you tell me about this? What's your update on that or whatever? I got to tell you, I coach all 3 of my kids. Don't put that on a text because you can't save that. You can't unless you do a screen print. You get an endless screen prints. Put it on an email. You can blind copy people. I blind copy myself on everything I want to make sure I have as a reminder for me. But that old school versus millennial, you can't convince me the millennial is a better way to do it right now to build relationships. And I think relationship building is incredibly critical to successful, not just successful business, hyper successful business. There's an easy opportunity to differentiate, like I just talked about. Hardly anyone does what I do there. I told Carrie this story. We built Amneal, and I talked about on relationships. High transparency, high integrity, proactive, et cetera. If we were going to be late on an order, we'd call the customer proactive and say, listen, our raw materials were late to arrive. So we're going to, instead of getting it to you August 2nd, it's going to be August 9th or 16th or whatever date it is. I can't tell you how many customers would thank us profusely for telling them. Because they'd say, listen, everybody makes mistakes. The supply chain has errors. But most of my competitors in the generic pharmaceutical industry, they'd wait till it was late and the customer called all upset. Oh, that's late? Really? The salesperson? Really? Well, they knew darn well it was late, but they'd play dumb. Again, lack of integrity. And the customers go, if you had told me 3 weeks ago, I could have planned. I could have bought some from your competitor just to cover a week's worth till I got your order or whatever. We just got so much value from customers of being high integrity, high transparency, and nobody does it. So go back to we were presenting to Wells Fargo. We're trying to refinance our debt with Amneal after about, we were probably 5 years in, and we're looking for I think a $400 million line of credit, whatever it was. And we had a presentation. It was going to be 2 hours about sales and marketing, 2 hours about the R&D pipeline, and 2 hours about finance. So I get up first and I got my slides, and they're as basic as this. And I just talked about pretty much all this stuff in a little bit different format, and transparency and integrity and knowing the relationships with the customers and the follow-up system we have to make sure hey, by the way, we got your order, and then your order's 2 weeks out, it's 1 week out, it just shipped, did it arrive okay? Just really good, proactive, which I learned from Marriott, a phenomenal company there from a customer standpoint. So I did this presentation. We ended up spending 4 hours on sales and marketing because a lot of questions. So then finally, the executive vice president of debt, I forget what his title was, but he was like he reported the CEO of Wells Fargo. And he was in there because we were obviously growing like this as a company. They knew where we were going. They knew we'd be $1 billion company before long. So they were kind of sucking up to us to make sure we loved them. He said, Jim, I got to ask you a question. I said, go ahead. And I forget the guy's name. And he said, there's nothing you can trademark on there. There's no secret sauce. Why would I bank on that? I said, oh, I could send this PowerPoint to all my competitors. They wouldn't know what to do with it. You got to do all this stuff I just talked about, you have to be intentional, and it has to be the way you operate and the way you believe in doing business. I said, and that's why we're at 39% per year growth in an industry that's growing at 6%, right? And everybody told us, don't go in the industry. It's a commodity business. There's no growth in there. And we were $1 billion in 10 years. So I think it's really important. You can differentiate with all this stuff. And that's the difference of the two approaches. Bring value in every interaction. I kind of told you about this before, and our president of Marriott that taught me that so many years ago, 1981. Even if it's no value to your business. So I'll give you an example. Desert Springs, the Marriott in Palm Desert, I was the first employee of that. Mr. Marriott wanted $175 million of convention business confirmed before we opened. We had $350 million. So we blew that one away, 200% a goal. But I had a lot of customers who would call me and say, hey, Jim, I really want to meet there in March, but we can only afford X dollars. And we opened as the most expensive resort in the country intentionally. I said, you know what? I said, I'd love to do business with you. If you can move to May when it's 100 degrees, I can get to those prices. But you stay in March, I've got 10 times the demand that I have rooms. But I got to tell you, if you go to the Quinta Resort down in La Quinta, they just refurbished it. It's a nice place. The rates are more in line with what you want, and you're only 60 room group. It'd probably be a better fit for you anyway. They went down there, they booked it. The guy called me from that resort and said, Jim, I can't thank you enough for that referral. It was absolutely perfect for our group. And someday when I can afford to come to your place in March, I'm coming back, but I've told everybody how much you helped me go to your competitor. You didn't try to sell me something that didn't provide value to me. So that pays dividends, right? You can provide value that, an article you saw or whatever. And it's easy to send links now, right? You can email a link, hey, I saw this article, I was thinking about you. And it shows up and it's something that is relevant and germane to whatever that person's personal life, business life, etc. So you got to be thinking about that. And again, it's going back to being intentional. If you have 5 people you really need to get to know to present your business to, well, then you better have a strategy and a plan and be hyper alert. Set your notifications to anything about generic pharmaceuticals to pop up, so you can send it to Jim because you want to build a relationship with him and you know that's his business or whatever. You want to cause candid, humble, and true learning discussions, right? You get, again, being intentional. You want to cause that. You know, help me understand why this. I don't understand. I've called so many customers, and I was pretty well known in the generics business, for instance, of really knowing way more about the total business, how people get reimbursed, et cetera, than most of my competitors. Most of my competitors they sell pills for a price, but I really like to learn my industry. So, but there's still times I call the head of Rite Aid and said, and explain this. I don't understand how do these fit together? I thought this and this happened. This is after, 8 or 10 years in the industry. People really appreciate when you're honest about that. And then this last one, send handwritten notes of thanks, recognition, and congratulations. And I got to tell you, this is something I've impressed on probably every class I've taught, and my kids in particular, who are all grown and business people. My son just texted me yesterday, for instance. He's 28. He said, Dad, I sent a handwritten note to the head of business development, was former head of business development, now president of the company he works for, to his home address, a personal handwritten note to congratulate him on his new son. And he goes, here's the text I got back. He said, Bryn, you're a class act. I can't remember the last time I got a handwritten note from anyone in business, right? It took Bryn 5 minutes, maybe. Yeah, he had to go to the assistant to get the address, but a handwritten note, do you know how much that means now? Back in the day, maybe it didn't mean as much, but now when everybody is text and email, a handwritten note, you're going to cut through the clutter. You know they're going to read it. Like if you can't get to somebody, send them a handwritten note on a card. I guarantee they're going to read it. It's going to get to them because it's so different. I used to use back in the day Federal Express, because this is when Federal Express first existed and not very many people used it. If I couldn't get through to somebody and I was getting lost in the clutter of their mail, I'd send a Federal Express with my letter inside it. I'd even put, see, I got you to read it. Like just to kind of let them know that I had been tenacious in trying to get a hold of them. So that's huge value there. You got the next one? So this one's a lot of words. Sorry about that, but I didn't find a way to really make it more efficient. So assuring reliability through follow-up and follow-through. This is a big, big failure for a lot of people. People just don't follow up or follow through as they should. And you can be it's so differentiated by doing this and doing it religiously. Can you say religiously nowadays? I don't know. Consistently. So I'm going to read it to you. Follow up every call, contact, or meeting via email. And you're not going to necessarily cover all these things on every one, but a lot of them you should. Thank you for your time. Thanks for allocating time, not giving me time. They didn't give you time, they allocated time. What connection points? Yeah, it was great to learn about your son or your daughter's ballet thing or whatever. Just a little snippet in there, right? You're kind of reinforcing that you listened. Remember we talked about really early in the slides? You listened, you really care on building a relationship. What topics did you discuss? I'll even put, hey, here's some of the things we discussed. What was learned? I really appreciate you explaining to me about this, or it was great that we both learned we have a mutual friend or we have a mutual need to find a solution to X in the supply chain. What any agreed upon actions, okay, that you're going to do, they're going to do, or you're both going to do. Okay, I'm going to go check with, Joe Smith to find out his thoughts on that upstream in the supply chain issue or whatever you agreed upon. You don't make stuff up, you just, and the timing. I'll get back to you by the end of next week or whatever. What decisions were made, we agreed we're going to talk, we agreed there is reason to get our operations teams together to work through this or whatever. And then what's the next contact timing and purpose? And as we discussed, or as you asked, that's always a really good one. As we agreed or as you asked, I'll be back in touch with you on the 1st of September to find out the results of your, August 30th board meeting, whatever. Put that in there. And it's okay to be, everybody wants to be, one paragraph or 2 paragraphs and get done. If you're putting fluff and crap in there, yeah, don't go long. But if you're reflecting on a conversation, a meaningful conversation you had with somebody, and you're touching back on points that you talked about with them, you're going to send, they will read it, because you're not just giving them BS. You're honoring the time they allocated to you. And it's amazing how many people commented to me over the years, Jim, everybody wants to write the shortest note they can, shortest letter they can. But then I get yours and you actually covered what's important and reminded me what we agreed upon. Because if they're your potential customer, potential investor, potential partner, they may not be taking the same copious notes you're taking. They're waiting for you to do the work. Well, then do the work and remind them what they've committed to do. That always helped me the most is, hey, you said you were going to do this, and then we would talk about this on this date. Well, you've got them held accountable, right? Now, may they blow it off? Yeah, they could blow it off. But I got to tell you, less chance of blowing it off, because then the next time you call them, remember what I said, pick up where you left off. Hey, Joe, in the last conversation, you said last week you were going to talk with Sue about X, Y, and Z. Were you able to have that conversation? Right? But usually you have reminded them and now they get it on their calendar, they give it to their assistant to remind them to go call or set up a meeting with Sue or whatever. It's a really valuable thing to do. It doesn't have to be a dissertation. It can be bullet points, but to the point. You don't want to put a whole bunch of fluff in there because they'll stop reading. But if it's saying, you asked me to do this, as we talked about, and who doesn't love hearing about their wife and their kids and their hobbies or whatever in the opening paragraph. So then you use those items in that for your next contact, right? Hey, as we talked about, Joe, because you can read through your letter and remind yourself exactly why you're supposed to be reconnecting 3 weeks later when you've talked to 20 other people. And then after each interaction, after each contact, whether it's in person or digitally, write a lot of notes, both personal and professional, whether it's in your notes section on your, on your computer or however you choose to do it, or a CRM or whatever. Write all those notes down, because you're going to want to know that your next conversation, spend 15 minutes before your next meeting or dinner or golf or Zoom and read through it. Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot. He said he was going to go. He was waiting to find out whether he's going to get in for the master's program at Harvard or the executive MBA at Harvard or whatever. That's the stuff you might have forgotten because you're busy too, right? And you want to be able to know that stuff. And then that last one there, always, and I didn't capitalize much in here, always follow up timely. If you tell them you're going to get back on August 10th, you absolutely better get back on August 10th because your integrity gets blown, right? You can't get around August 10th. If you said I'm going to get in touch with you on the 10th and give you an update, and reconnect in line with the commitment you made. You might even say, I don't have an answer yet. I'm still waiting to hear back. I've called I'm working with our operations guys and they've been swamped and they need a little more time to figure out if we can do that for you, whatever. But say, as you requested or as I committed to get back to you on the 10th, today's the 10th, and I don't have the answer yet, but I really wanted to honor my commitment to you and get back to you. You can say it that bluntly. That builds so much credibility. So when Amneal, when we won one of our awards with Cardinal Health, the EVP of sourcing, who's become a very, very good friend of mine, he stood up when he got the award. He said, you know what I love about Amneal? Because we got top supplier of all their suppliers. And this is when we were only doing we were probably only doing a couple $100 million with them. And keep in mind, they're one of the top 3 in the industry. So we weren't that big yet. We were probably doing $700 million, $600 million as a company. And so there were companies who were doing $4 billion with them. So we got top supplier. And he said, you know what I love about Amneal? They don't always say yes and they don't always say no. But if they don't know the answer, they'll tell you they'll get back to you and when they'll get back to you. And if they still don't have the answer, they'll get back to you and say, I'm sorry, we don't have the answer quite yet. It's going to be another day or another week or whatever. But you never didn't know where Amneal stood. And they always wanted to do business better for both of us, not just a win-lose situation. And you build so much integrity by following up. And, if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know the answer, but I'll get it for you. But you better then go get it. Don't say, I'll get it for you and then never follow up. I can't tell you how much judgment happens, whether it's overtly or in the back of their minds. There's a lot of judgment happens on how you follow up or not. Next slide, Carrie. So the last step, re-engaging over time and continuing to build the relationship. Relationships aren't a stopping point. It's not an end. Stay passionate and true to your overall attitude, approach, and application that we talked about at the beginning. If it wanes, people will see that. If you were like, yeah, I just wanted to get something out of you that day, and I didn't get it, so now you don't mean much to me, that's very evident. And you may not, if it's a potential investor you think you're never going to see again, okay, well, maybe, but I never took that approach. I always took the approach, some down the road, I'm probably going to want to work with this person, and I better treat it as such. Remember that you're always building a relationship. I had to counsel a few of my salespeople here and there. When you're at the bar at 1 o'clock in the morning at a trade show, you're still building or destroying a relationship. You're never off work. You're not working, but your impression and relationship with that person is always being evaluated. Maybe in the back of their mind, but what a sloppy drunk this guy is, or wow, he's kind of hanging with everybody, but he's still alert. He hasn't gone over the board, whatever. And that's where it goes to the next bullet point. Every interaction does have an impact on your relationship, good, bad, or neutral, right? You can enhance the relationship, and that's what Bill Marriott used to say. He goes, okay, so how is our brand today better than it was yesterday because of what you did? And he talked to you individually like that, and he meant it. He was talk about a sincere businessman. I don't think he ever said anything he didn't 100% mean and believe. He said, so has our brand gotten better, or has it gotten tarnished today? Did you get mad and yell at a customer, or did you go above and beyond? I mean, it's a great thing to ask yourself, right? If I'm an entrepreneur, I'm trying to build relationships with investors or partners. What did I do today? Sometimes I'll think about it. I still do that now, and I'll send a text to somebody. Hey, I was just thinking about, I was reading through this, and it reminded me of that conversation we had 10 years ago. I just sent one of those about 2 weeks ago. And we ended up having an hour and a half conversation. And ironically, then yesterday, I needed to call that person to get some information, or not information, but input and perspective on something that I had no idea was going to happen. But it's you got to remember you're always impacting that. Revisit each of these steps all the way through for every interaction, because it all applies. None of this is a single point in time. And then develop matrix relationships. Again, if this is a little bit different than the bullet I had earlier. So let's say you really want to get a certain investor. Well, let's get who do you know that can help you have a matrix relationship with that one person? In other words, does Carrie know him? Does this other operations person know him? Does somebody that you've worked with before know that person? You know that person. How about your business partner, whatever their specialty is? Are you all building relationships so that the guy or gal or whoever it is says, hey, you guys clearly are focused on me, whether they say it overtly, and you're all asking appropriate questions for your areas of expertise. That really gives me a lot of confidence in working with you guys, or at least exploring it deeper, etc. That's the matrix relationships are highly valuable. Too many people try to be the Lone Ranger, and that's just, can you do it? Yeah, there are some people who are very successful at that. I got to tell you though, I'd put my money on the matrix relationship all the time, because you make each other stronger, you fill the gaps, and all of a sudden you have the best combined value creation for both you and them by having this matrix relationship. And then show consistent, sincere desire, enthusiasm to build a relationship. That's kind of the all of it all together. If that's not there, people are going to see through that, and you can still do business together. It doesn't mean you can't. But my logic is always, if I can have the best relationship, I've got the best chance to have the best business value together. And again, it talks about the candor and the honesty and the integrity. You get the feedback you get. It doesn't have them make bad business decisions, but it helps them help you. And they can become your coach and your advisor, etc. And there. Thanks for your time, attention, and interest. I don't know if I'm assuming I had attention and interest. I don't know, because I'm only looking at pictures of Carrie, and Carrie and Michelle, and but hopefully you got something out of that.
That was great. Thank you so much, Jim. So we did get one question from Steve Fryer. His question was, what was your biggest mistake?
Steve Fryer? Hi, Steve. Well, I'll tell you a humorous one. I won't tell you my catastrophic mistake, but remember that guy, Jerry Heller, I talked about, who was the CEO of Maze Drugs, and the one that had the Walmart thing that never happened, that he thought Walmart was a kook. And we decided, because I did a lot of relationship building with customers, to go do what they like to do. Right? So Jerry's a big skier. And at the time, scary part, Jerry's probably about my age now, is how old he was then. This is back in early 2000. And so the president of my division, I was EVP-Sales and Marketing, so I'm the president of retail, and the president of our company and I took Jerry to Vail for a ski trip. And so we stayed at the Arabelle Hotel. We had the spa. We had great dinners, spectacular. So the first day we're out there, and we were skiing, and have Jerry's really good skier, not phenomenal, but really good, and but loved to ski. And the president of our company and I've been skiing since I was 3, and I can ski anything on the mountain. We're both very aggressive skiers. And then my boss hadn't skied in 10 years, bought brand new stuff. He had all the clothes and the poles, and injured his back halfway down the first run, which was, he was fine, but it was pretty funny. But anyway, then Jerry and I went and skied, and I took him to a place that ended up being a little bit over his abilities. And I got down to the bottom of the run. It was through the trees, and probably half an hour later, he came down. He's in a full sweat. He looks like he's been run over by a truck. It looks like he's having a heart attack. I called the ski patrol and get him down there, and he ended up spending 2 days in the hospital. It was probably not a wise decision to go. And my president of our company goes, "Jim, you almost killed one of our important customers. That's probably not a good way." And I'm like 6 months into the industry. I'm not any cagey veteran by any means, but I had some business flaws, but those would be a little too long to explain.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing that.
We have another question from Sean. All things equal, what is the number one thing every salesperson should do every day?
Plan what you're going to do. Be intentional about it. Don't just pick up the phone and wing it, because too many salespeople do, and they're wasting their time. They're wasting the customer's time or the potential customer's time. If you don't know what you want to accomplish, relationship building, business questions, solving a problem, getting through getting them to say yes, whatever. If you don't really know what you want to accomplish, don't pick up the phone and call. Take the time to do that, because you're gonna hurt your relationship, because you call and kind of stumble around and fumble around, and they kind of go, "Okay, why did he call?" And you're not going to be as effective. And especially now where you can't do face-to-face, where it's only Zoom and phone calls, it's more important now, to me, to be well planned and have your bullet points. Don't be scripted, but have the things you want to make sure you cover, and go back to your notes from the last call, etc.
Thank you, Jim. So I had a question about storytelling. Through this presentation, you obviously shared a handful of great stories, and you're a great storyteller. How important in the relationship building do you find storytelling to be?
Well, probably, in hindsight, I probably should have used that terminology. That's what I was talking about. When you find out about these connection points and you revert back with stories, with reconnect, where you can connect it. Yeah, I was there. And the interesting thing, and for me, I as an adult, I've been blessed to travel a lot all over the world. But as a kid, I played on probably 20 different sports. My parents exposed me to every sport. And I was in theater, and I was in band, and I was in a fraternity, and went to college. And, I have all this diverse group of stories and experiences that there aren't too many people that I can't find some connection point. And Carrie, you were witness to it when we first got together. Because of my business experience, and the key is, do you remember it and think about it? Because you all probably have almost as many stories that you can say, oh, you know, I heard about that. That's in Des Moines, right? Isn't that school in Des Moines? Well, you know, funny thing happened, blah, 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 either tied to the school or Des Moines or whatever. You find ways to make stories and stories is what connects people in relationships. Think about families sitting around. You talk about the stories from all the years ago. And remember when you were 12 years old and you made me sit outside the house or whatever. Storytelling is, I'm glad you asked that question. I didn't phrase it that way, but that is a critical component of relationship building. But know whether you're a good or a bad storyteller too.
That's right. And I think, that's a great point. I think getting feedback, because there are different ways to tell it. And you know, even in some cases, the person you're building a relationship may be a great storyteller, or they may not be a good storyteller. And I thought your point on mirroring was a great one. Not to say if they're a terrible storyteller, you should mirror back a bad story,
but don't take 20 minutes on your story if they took 2 on yours.
That's right. Exactly. So, you know, just picking up on those things. I call myself a plane ride friend, in that I want to believe I can have a conversation with almost anybody, kind of like you said, over the course of a plane ride, and at least be tolerable. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us, for presenting this. I mean, there's just so much in here that I think, you know, timeless value and incredible. And, you know, it reminds me, you know, there's moments where I actually think I'm good at this, that, you know, I have so much more to go. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And just like I said, I guess, Michelle, you'll send out the document to everybody for the notes if they want it.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, great. Well, thank you. I was honored, Carrie, when you asked, and it was great to put these notes down, because I've talked about a lot of this stuff over the years and haven't really compiled them. So it was good. I appreciate you triggering that.
Absolutely. My pleasure. All right. We'll talk soon.
You got it. Bye.